Listen, we need to talk about Candace Owens, not gently, not delicately, not with incense burning and soft jazz. We need to talk about this with the same chaotic clarity the situation deserves. Because something has shifted. The vibe is off, the timeline is trembling, and a woman who built a whole career screaming about facts, not feelings, has now announced that her feelings are receiving direct messages from the spirit realm. She says she's having prophetic dreams. Prophetic dreams. Specifically about Charlie Kirk's death. Not symbolic dreams. Not, I had a weird anxiety dream and I'm processing my stress dreams. No. She framed it as spiritual insight, premonition, divine warning, a download from beyond the veil. And we are supposed to pretend that is normal. This is the same ideological ecosystem that told us astrology was demonic. That tarot cards were gateways to hell. That manifestation was witchcraft. That meditation was suspicious. That Beyoncé's stage lighting was a portal. That yoga was spiritually dangerous. That crystals were satanic. That therapy was secular brainwashing. But now suddenly we are cool with visions. We are cool with premonitions. We are cool with dream prophecy. Welcome to the reboot nobody asked for, the conservative cinematic universe paranormal phase. Let's be honest. If Candace Owens had blue hair and a nose ring and said she had prophetic dreams about a political figure, her own audience would be foaming at the mouth calling her possessed. They would be uploading YouTube videos titled "Ex-Witch Confesses the Demon Behind Her Dreams" with a shocked face thumbnail and 3 crying emojis. But because it's Candace, suddenly it's, we must take her seriously. No, we must not. We must laugh. Firmly. Because if your worldview says witchcraft is real, then you cannot casually announce you are having supernatural visions without also accepting that you have just accidentally rebranded yourself as the very thing you spent years condemning. This is not political commentary anymore. This is theological fan fiction. And it did not stop there. Of course it did not. Because once you open the door to prophetic dreams, the next logical step is chaos with a microphone. She then suggested that Charlie Kirk might be a time traveller. A time traveller. Not as a joke. Not as satire. Not with a wink. She floated it as a genuine possibility, a speculative concern, a thought she felt compelled to share.
He had ever eaten. Anyways, the setting of this particular dream, however, had one dramatic difference. We were not there for the opening of the embassy. And this difference, by the way, I don't really understand yet. I'm just sharing it with you. Instead, we were there in this dream setting for Bibi Netanyahu's wife's funeral. Again, that makes entirely no sense. I've never met his wife. I've never spoken about his wife. I know nothing about his wife. So that's just the context of it. I don't make the rules of dream world. And obviously, as we were sitting there, it didn't strike me as weird because when you're in your dream state, everything that happens for some reason feels like, oh yeah, this is totally normal. Anyway, Charlie said to me, I don't have much time. He followed that up explaining to me that I needed to see what happened on his left. And he told me explicitly, they betrayed me, multiple people. And I said, I know, but who? Then came the frustrating part of the dream. Every time I would say who, you know, when you're in a dream and you go who, or you try to speak in the dream, and then suddenly you're actually speaking in real life and you start to wake yourself up from the dream by accident. That's what kept happening. And whenever I would try to listen to what he was saying, it sounded like he was underwater. So I was frustrated by this. I can't get to the part where you tell me who betrayed you. It wasn't until the 3rd week after his death that finally one face came through in this dream. It came through as clear as day from around the corner of the restaurant. And it was Andrew Colvet's. Now you have to imagine in the immediate aftermath of this, I was not thinking Turning Point USA. Where we're at today is almost like unimaginable going back there. In fact, I was very friendly with Andrew Colvet. We had spoken extensively in the aftermath of Charlie's death. I've known him for years. And I felt really weird about having seen him in this dream, but it was so vivid and it was so compelling that I felt that as weird and as odd as it was, that I had to text him and tell him what I saw. And this is the text, just sharing with you so you guys know if this all really happened. I said, I rarely have vivid dreams, but I had one clear as day this weekend. Charlie came to me and he sat down and he told me that he did not have much time, that I needed to know that he was in fact betrayed and that they are hiding what happened to my left. I believe his soul is in purgatory, and I believe that you know much more than you've said publicly or privately. And Andrew Colbert never answered. Last time Andrew Colbert and I spoke.
At this point, we are no longer in pundit territory. We are in season 3 of a streaming show that started grounded, but has now introduced multiverse lore because the writers ran out of ideas. You can almost see the pitch meeting. So what if Candace starts having visions? Cool. And then she suggests Charlie is a time traveler. Cool. And then nothing needs to make sense anymore. Greenlit. This is what happens when someone lives too long inside an echo chamber where nobody ever challenges them with grounded reality. The takes escalate. The need for relevance intensifies. The shock value inflation spirals out of control. Eventually, you are no longer reacting to the world. You are reacting to your own internal mythology. It becomes self-referential, self-mythologizing. A feedback loop of self-importance, where every thought feels cosmic, every emotion feels prophetic, every hunch feels like destiny. This is not intellectual confidence. This is narrative intoxication. And we need to name it. Candace Owens did not wake up one day possessed by chaos. This is the natural outcome of a career built on spectacle over substance. When your brand is outrage, eventually outrage becomes too small. When your brand is controversy, eventually controversy becomes mundane. You have to escalate, you have to go bigger, you have to transcend politics and enter metaphysics. You start with, I'm just asking questions, then you move to, they don't want you to know the truth. Then you evolve into, I receive information others cannot access. That is not commentary. That is Messiah complex adjacent. And the audience shift is fascinating. There are people right now trying to rationalize this, people writing paragraphs like, well, actually, prophetic dreams are biblical. People desperately Googling scripture to make this make sense. People trying to retrofit theology around one influencer's unraveling. That is what parasocial loyalty does to the brain. It turns people into unpaid PR teams for nonsense. Instead of saying, hey, maybe this is a sign that someone is spiraling, they say, we must defend her spiritual gift. No, we must log off. There is also a darker layer here that needs to be addressed with seriousness beneath the humour. When public figures begin talking about premonitions of death involving real people, that crosses into deeply irresponsible territory. Words shape perception. Narratives shape behaviour. Public speculation about someone's death can have consequences that go beyond vibes. It is not edgy. It is not brave. It is not insightful. It is reckless. And the irony is brutal.
He said, as I showed you in earlier messages, that he was a time traveler and he had to find me. Is that just something people are saying to their homies in text messages? And again, not anything that I would have placed so much emphasis on back when he was saying it, but it came to fruition. The other parts, he did die young. Why did he think that him dying young was necessary in order to change things? He did die young. It is related to Turning Point USA. In some way or another, at the very least, we can all agree it's related to him speaking at a campus event for Turning Point USA. I'm totally occupied by this. I tell you, I read these messages and I'm going, what is this? What is reality, actually? And Charlie died. Yes, like I said, it was related to this organization. And I think we would all agree that his death and the manner that they did it changed the world in ways that I don't think we can fully realize, or certainly not in a way that I can articulate. You just cannot pretend that all of this is one big unhappy coincidence. It's entirely plausible, I think plausible, that they knew something about Charlie. And that's why they had him marked and had him monitored and had him likely followed since he was young. And maybe they thought, like the agents think, that if they swarmed him and they stayed with him and they pretended to be his friend, that ultimately they could control Charlie and perhaps change an outcome. They could literally change an outcome related to Charlie. So when for the first time in his life, because I do believe he was managed, I mean, I've already said I was handled. I didn't recognize that I had agents. And for the first time in his life, Charlie peeks his head up and starts to push back in a meaningful way. They couldn't stop him from becoming bigger. That seemed to be inevitable. But they panicked. They seem to have panicked, right? I mean, this is just starting to happen within a year when Charlie's going like, hey, man, I don't actually think this. I don't actually believe this. And then he goes, you know what? Take the money. Take the money out of the organization. And they panicked. They freaked out. And their solution was, no, just kill him. Just kill him. We can't have this.
The quality is so much better than I expected. It feels like something way more expensive. Honestly, it's kind of a steal. Show support to Nubian narrator and cop some merch before it's sold out again.
Because the same political sphere that constantly accuses everyone else of hysteria, emotional fragility and delusion is now platforming literal supernatural speculation as discourse. They mocked mental health conversations for years. They dismissed trauma language as weakness. They reduced emotional nuance to snowflake culture. They framed therapy as ideological grooming. But now we are supposed to gently hold space for dream prophecies. The hypocrisy is not subtle. It is theatrical. And the timeline knows it. You can feel the collective shift. The memes write themselves. The jokes are too easy. The satire does not need exaggeration. Reality is doing the heavy lifting. There are moments in internet culture where someone crosses a line so cleanly that the audience collectively says, "We have entered a new era." This is one of those moments. This is the plot twist episode. This is the season where the main character becomes unreliable. And look, let's be real, watching powerful people unravel is a guilty pleasure of the modern age. There is something cathartic about seeing arrogance collide with its own absurdity. There is something satisfying about watching someone who built a career on certainty now drift into mystical incoherence. It feels like narrative justice, not moral justice. Narrative justice, the kind where the story eats its own character. Candace Owens built a platform on performance of certainty, absolute confidence, sharp rhetoric, total conviction. But conviction without grounding becomes theatre, and theatre without self-awareness becomes parody. This is not someone losing a debate. This is someone losing narrative coherence. There is also the broader cultural moment to consider. We are living in an era where attention is currency and attention rewards extremity. The more outlandish the claim, the more it spreads. The more it spreads, the more it becomes reinforced. The algorithm does not reward stability, it rewards spectacle. So when someone's relevance begins to plateau, there is pressure. Pressure to escalate, pressure to reinvent, pressure to shock, pressure to say something nobody else is saying. You can feel the escalation pattern. Controversial opinion, hot take, provocation, outrage bait. Conspiracy adjacent, spiritual framing, paranormal suggestion, prophecy. That is not a leap, that is a staircase. And at the top of that staircase is the loss of credibility. Not because people are cruel, but because reality has a threshold. Eventually the suspension of disbelief breaks. Even your own audience starts to feel uneasy. You see the cracks in comment sections, the nervous laughter, the "I love her, but," the "maybe she should take a break," the "we need to pray for her," the coded language of discomfort. They know something is off. They just do not want to say it directly because they are still attached to the persona they invested in. That is the danger of influencer culture. When someone becomes more brand than human, people struggle to accept their unraveling. They try to protect the brand instead of acknowledging the person needs grounding. But we are not her caretakers. We are observers. And as observers, we are allowed to call absurdity what it is. This is absurd. Not in a funny, quirky way, in a concerning, surreal, cultural moment kind of way. The time traveler suggestion alone deserves its own museum exhibit. Imagine building an entire ideological identity on anti-intellectual populism, only to end up sounding like the plot summary of a rejected Doctor Who episode. Charlie Kirk as a time traveler sent back to preserve the conservative timeline. Candace as the prophet receiving dream warnings. Turning Point USA as the resistance cell, the libs as interdimensional disruptors. You can see the fanfic forming, you can hear the orchestral soundtrack swelling. The problem is that she is not presenting this as fiction. She is presenting it as conversation, as thought leadership, as cultural commentary. And that matters. There is a difference between satire and delusion. There is a difference between metaphor and literal belief. There is a difference between exploring ideas and losing tether to shared reality. This is not about disagreement. This is not about politics. This is about coherence. You cannot spend years mocking others for believing in anything outside empirical evidence and then pivot into mysticism without acknowledging the contradiction. You cannot ridicule spiritual intuition while claiming your own. You cannot demonize everyone else's metaphysical frameworks and then casually adopt one when it suits your narrative. You do not get to call astrology demonic and prophecy divine without explaining the difference. You do not get to mock manifestation and then imply destiny. You do not get to ridicule spiritual practices and then claim spiritual authority. That is not consistency. That is convenience. And people are noticing. What makes this moment fascinating is not just that Candace Owens said something strange. It is that she revealed the fragility of influencer intellectualism. The entire structure depends on performance of confidence. Once that performance cracks, the whole persona wobbles. And we are watching the wobble in real time. This is why it feels like unraveling, not because she is suddenly different, but because the mask of controlled narrative has slipped. The internal monologue has started leaking into public space. The filter has thinned. It is like watching someone forget they are on stage. You are not supposed to hear the character's intrusive thoughts. You are not supposed to hear the draft version of the script. You are not supposed to see the unedited stream of consciousness. But we are seeing it. And the audience does not know whether to laugh, worry, or disengage, so they do all three at once. The memes are flying. The concern posts are rising. The think pieces are brewing. The silence from certain allies is loud. This is the moment where cultural relevance shifts, where someone who once controlled narrative becomes subject to narrative, where the public conversation is no longer about her arguments but about her stability. And that is a brutal place to be as a public figure. Because you cannot debate your way out of that. You cannot logic your way back to credibility once the perception shifts from controversial thinker to unreliable narrator. Once people start viewing your content through a lens of instability, every statement becomes suspect. Every idea becomes reframed, every take becomes filtered through concern instead of engagement. That is the reputational cliff. You can be wrong and recover. You can be controversial and recover. You can be disliked and recover. But once you are perceived as ungrounded, recovery becomes difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. And the most uncomfortable part of this entire situation is that the same online ecosystem that rewards extremity will continue feeding this. She will get attention for this. She will trend for this. People will clip this. Reaction videos will multiply. The spectacle will grow. The system will reinforce the behaviour that led here. Which means unless there is self-awareness and recalibration, the takes will likely escalate further. What comes after prophecy and time travel? Alien disclosure, spiritual warfare narratives, chosen one framing, hidden knowledge claims, apocalyptic warnings. This is not mockery, this is pattern recognition. This is the trajectory of many public figures who drift from commentary into self-mythologizing. History is full of examples. And the audience response will determine the direction. If people reward it, it grows. If people disengage, it fades. But right now, the internet is doing what the internet does, turning it into content. Which is why this moment feels both hilarious and unsettling at the same time. It is funny because the irony is perfect. It is unsettling because this is a real person with real influence saying deeply ungrounded things to a massive audience. You can laugh and still acknowledge the weight of that. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So yes, the jokes are flying. Yes, the witch arc memes are valid. Yes, the time traveller discourse is absurd. Yes, the irony is exquisite. But underneath the humour is a reminder of something serious, when ideology replaces grounding, when performance replaces reflection, when echo chambers replace challenge, when relevance replaces responsibility. The outcome is not enlightenment, the outcome is drift. And drift without anchors leads anywhere. Right now it looks like prophetic dreams and sci-fi speculation, but the underlying issue is loss of epistemic discipline, loss of the ability to distinguish between internal experience and external reality, loss of the boundaries between metaphor and belief, and that matters. Not just for her, but for anyone watching and internalizing this as normal discourse. So laugh, but also observe and learn. Learn what happens when certainty is built without humility. Learn what happens when platforms reward spectacle over substance. Learn what happens when someone starts believing their own mythology. Because this is not just about Candace Owens. This is about the ecosystem that produces moments like this. The internet does not just amplify voices, it distorts them. It warps incentives. It pushes people toward extremes because extremes travel faster. And eventually, someone crosses a line where the persona they built can no longer contain the person behind it. That is where we are.
Really think he was a time traveler. He said, as I showed you in earlier messages, that he was a time traveler and he had to find me. I said to him in response that I didn't feel the same way and that I thought I was from another planet, that I was an alien my entire life. Just do not get it here. I think that these people are not humans, that they're sentinels that maybe look like humans. That's how I feel. I feel like it's the single solitary event that contributed to my realization that the future is happening right now. I'm telling you, I don't even think these people are human. Like, I look at Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Peter Thiel, and I'm pretty sure they're hybrid. You know what I mean? Like, they just look like an Apple software that I should be able to download at night. I rarely have vivid dreams. And I did, in fact, have a very vivid one over the weekend. Charlie came to me and he told me that he was betrayed.
It's Thursday evening, the 15th of January, 2026. And I come to you very, very sad about this. I've known Candace Owens for 10 years. She's done a lot of great work. She's been a beautiful person. And a month ago in December, I said, listen, I think she's being set up by operatives. I think she's being lied to by Mitch Snow and others. I said, I think she's having a mental breakdown. People said, how dare you? That's the old Soviet Union. You want to put her in a padded room. You want to put her in a straitjacket. I didn't say that. I said, we've looked at her Egyptian plane thing. We've looked at Mitch Snow, and it's a fraud. And all of that's come out to be accurate now. You know, Mitch Snow says his dad was a Zodiac killer. The people all have alibis for Fort Huachuca. But now she comes out yesterday and says with a straight face, not satire, that Charlie Kirk is a time traveler in a secret government project, that she's always known she's an alien, and that Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and Peter Thiel are human reptoid hybrids. Now, some people will say, well, you've said that. No, that's David Icke. And, you know, he's welcome to say that. My point is you look at her eyes, you look at everything she's saying, she is clearly crashing out. And now anybody questioning Charlie Kirk's assassination, and there are real questions, and Kash Patel caught, I broke this back in September, ordering a cover-up of accomplices with the 10 trannies saying he'll be dead tomorrow when he comes to this university. Now that's all discredited because of what's been done here. And she is burning herself down in lifetime. I don't like seeing this happen. And of course, I've been vindicated. Oh, I'm the Mossad operative, and I'm the bad guy, and I'm the liar, and it doesn't matter if all of Mitch's stories turn out to not be true. If he was at Huachuca, we all know it's true. And now here we are. Time travel. Space aliens. Next, she's going to say she's Santa Claus. It's so sad. You know, I've been accused of being a conspiracy theorist myself, but 99% of what I cover is news and information. I just give my opinion, my analysis. So, Candace, I hope you can come back to the light. I hope your husband, Mr. Farmer, can talk to you. And I hope he's not behind this and get you to come back to reality. We're really worried about you. We're so concerned about you. And when I said that a month ago, your cynical fans attacked me and said that I wanted to put you in a rubber room.
Candace Owens did not become a witch overnight. She simply walked so far into contradiction that the label now fits by her own framework. Candace Owens did not become a sci-fi character overnight. She simply followed the logic of spectacle to its inevitable conclusion. This is not character assassination, this is narrative observation. You said you had prophetic dreams. You suggested time travel. The public responded accordingly. That is not cancel culture, that is cause and effect. And the most poetic part of all of this? She built her career mocking others for believing in things she could not see. Now she is asking people to take her invisible experiences seriously. That is the arc. That is the irony. That is the story. And the timeline is watching, popcorn in hand, wondering what episode comes next. Not right, not left, just real.